There are hurts and there are pains that no analgesic could ever reach. And that is where the psychosocial and spiritual care comes in.
Compassion and love in the healthcare system. I think these values are the bedrock of a health system.
I'd like us to begin to recapture what health means and what it means to have a healthcare system, and within which, for example, we actively address issues of what does it mean to be well in the midst of chronic illness.
If there is a loving and caring relationship, if there is room enough for talking about the important issues, if there is forgiveness between people, I think that not only healthcare but the whole world could be changed.
The call is to be a part of that enormous transformation that is on the brink and can happen to make healthcare much more compassionate and to make it accessible, affordable, and responsive to people around the world. It's a big call. And you need big calls in your life. You need to work toward something that gives energy and vision beyond a narrow focus.
The call to the world is a vision of the healthcare system that could be awe-inspiring, even spiritual, where everybody, the care receivers as well as the care providers, can find those moments of love, those moments of forgiveness, those sacred moments of healing.
You're not a number, you're not your disease, you're a person. Every person is different. A lot of times doctors just look at you as a diagnosis and say, okay, you have this and we give you this chemo and we give you this radiation and then see ya. It's really important for doctors to have the resources to be able to give the patients support systems and to be able to deal with their spirituality. And to quell their fears.
One of the greatest joys I have now is working in an interdisciplinary team, an outpatient palliative care team. And there is not a single session that I have with the team, and we are an equal team, where I have not learned something incredibly wise from a question that one of my teammates will ask a patient. And I just see how much richer our treatment plan is, because we include everybody on the team and the patient and the family. So I told the team a little bit about your story.
I had cancer 11 years ago and I went off my medicine and it came back.
The greatest challenge is when we become so distracted by a multiplicity of tasks to be done versus focusing on the present moment. If you're a patient and someone walks into your room, there can be chaos all around you, but if that person shows up with calm and compassion and care, you know it before they even open their mouth. We run the risk of missing a great deal of what I would say sacrament of the moment. Glimmers of goodness, of hope, of joy.
Even as you walk through the gates of City of Hope, you can see how they honor the whole person and the spiritual dimension of life. Betty Farrell, an amazing nurse researcher, palliative care nurse, has done a lot of work on the role of forgiveness in nursing. And forgiveness is a major issue for patients. Looking back on their life, needing to reconcile perhaps, or needing to ask for forgiveness, or needing to forgive.
There's been a tremendous change and really, I think, a revolution in how we view people and healthcare. We've come to really have a much greater understanding of physical needs, psychological needs, social dimension, and spiritual well-being. What a patient may say to you is, well, I'm not religious, but I'll tell you, spirituality for me, it means feeling the sun on my face. And so we'll say, well, how can we help you? How can we tend to your spiritual needs as well as your physical needs? We had a Native American patient a while back who said, my life, my family, my tradition is connection with nature. If I could go outside and feel the wind in my hair one more time, that would be all I need.
For us in the healthcare professions, forgiveness is one of the critical tools that will help somebody who is in the hospital find reconciliation, to find a way to bridge that gap of brokenness that is caused by a family rift.
A gentleman comes to mind who was dealing with breast cancer for himself and who had had a life of great difficulty and angst and had burned every bridge that he had ever crossed, and who was now facing his end of life with a great deal of remorse. We learned that his desire was to reconnect with some of these people that he had been out of contact with for so long. And he was able in the last 2 weeks of his life to do a lot of reconciliation. That was extremely important for him.
If I can relieve this mother's pain and make it possible for her to physically be able to sit up and hold her infant, that is love. If I can do the necessary work that will help this estranged son come to his mother's bedside, and if because of our good chaplaincy and social work and nursing, if we have enabled that son to know how to be with his mother, if I can do something that will promote the opportunity for forgiveness, that is love.
Remember, you and I had a discussion about this early on, and you didn't want to be in the hospital.
Right.
And you didn't want to take a chance of being worse off than you were already.
I used to work in the hospital, so I've seen the different stages of this.
I'm a palliative care physician. In my work, I focus on improving quality of life for patients, dealing with the difficult subjects that come up for them as they face very serious chronic illness. I have a unique perspective on what it is to be a patient, and that has influenced my medical practice deeply. I was diagnosed with cancer during my last year of my residency training. The doctor at that time did not look me in the face. He sat at his desk and he bowed his head down and he told me I had a clonal disorder. And I said, clonal means cells that grow from each other, identical, and that's what cancer does. And he goes, yes, that's what you have. And that was how I found out. It was like being in another universe. I was numb. I couldn't even think straight. If you destroy somebody's soul in the first 5 minutes, what good have you done? There's no trust left. And I think my experience is that trust is one of the most important things between a patient and their doctor. Back when I went to medical school, we were not allowed to sit on a patient's bedside. We weren't supposed to touch or kiss or hug. As I grew older and as I battled cancer, I found that I knew how I felt inside, so I thought maybe it's time to take my feelings that I had as being a patient and transfer that into my care. So it's things like really understanding what they want, knowing when to be quiet, knowing when to not preach at them, and that there are times that people want their hand held like any of us. It's okay to provide a hug, to let yourself open up to this person that you have this relationship with. You sound perfect.
It's important that the patient has community around them. We come into this world in a community, and that sense of family and ritual and rites of passage, there is something about that very strong connection that is critical. I am because we are. And I reach out my hands to those who surround me on the earth at this time, because that is so much a part of my definition.
Dr. Scavarin at the North End Community Clinic is one of the projects that we funded. His clinic is a community. It was born out of a community. It was created out of the needs of the community. He listened to what the community needed, and he created a health clinic to meet their needs.
The North End is a predominantly Puerto Rican community. There's a high incidence of HIV/AIDS, diabetes, and heart disease-related diseases. Hep C is pretty common, and there are, the rates here are pretty high.
Picture this thing about being isolated, this thing that permeates neighborhoods like this. And imagine being a parent and your kid has asthma and you don't know what to do. You wind up in some emergency room where they don't speak your language and they don't treat you well, and your kid suffers more. And how do you feel? You feel even more isolated. You know, I can't even care for my kid.
So what we've done is we've brought the mental health providers and the substance abuse providers with the primary care providers and other social services together so that we are providing these services comprehensively. The campus itself provides spaces to exercise. We open up the pool, the gym, and we do informational sort of workshops and things so that folks get to learn more about eating better and staying healthy and staying active.
And our job is to find people where they are and try to have them understand that this is their place, that this is theirs, and they should feel comfortable here, and they should feel at home, and they know what to do when something comes up. I've been very fortunate. I've had a wonderful time here. This is my community, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
The call is to think in terms of those folks in Hong Kong, China, India, Africa, South America, Australia, New Zealand, and to be open to how do we dialogue across cultures and languages with the best of technology and information about best practices, but with a sense of awareness of the way the Spirit moves through different cultures and be responsive to that.
We're now taking action as community, building on these little pockets of work that's been happening around the world and highlighting it. We are beginning to see a ripple effect. One person cannot push that ripple out. It has to be a community, and that's what this global network is about. The power of working with like-minded people is that we see the fire in each of ourselves. We see it, I see it in another person, they see it in me, and it grows. And I think that's how the movement happens.
We want very much to be able to help healthcare professionals take a holistic approach to healthcare, to look at the whole person. In order to do that, they need to realize that they too have emotional and spiritual needs. We want to help them to develop the skills to be able to do that.
We hope that these projects that people will see will inspire people to get back in touch with that original call they had to be nurses, to be doctors, to be social workers, to be psychologists, to be physical therapists, to be chaplains, that we hope that they get back to that original root of trying to serve out of love.
I'm doing okay, yeah. No one really knows this human being, the depth, to use a technical word, the soul or the spirit of this person. Be so aware, if you are the caregiver, so aware that this is a human body and soul. It is a human story. Sometimes we deal clumsily with those who are some way very sick or in danger of dying. It's frightening. We can see ourselves there. And I don't want to be like that. But instead, if we can see ourselves and see a human soul, we're not frightened. We're not frightened. This I stole from someone else who was training students to work in a nursing home. They said, well, how can we learn anything from people who can't even talk anymore? And the person who was supervising them said they are rare parchments waiting to be read. We don't know quite who that person in the bed really is. So we listen.
The goals of the network will be to act as a place of convening, where we can really inspire each other, keeping at the forefront the patient and the family, and also the healthcare providers, how we can really realize our full selves, how we can practice compassion, how we can receive compassion, how we can honor the dignity of anyone from childbirth to death, and how we can have systems that reflect that are really spiritually grounded in dignity, love, and compassion.